The morning sun cast a golden glow over the quiet town of Oak Ridge, where life moved at a slower, more predictable pace. The townspeople were simple, hard-working folks, bound together by a deep sense of community. Among them was young Liam Carter, the son of a struggling farmer, who walked the dusty road to Oak Ridge Academy every day with a bag full of books and a heart full of dreams. Liam wasn't like most kids at the prestigious private school. His clothes weren't designer, his shoes had scuff marks from years of use, and while others arrived in sleek cars, he trudged along the roadside, dodging puddles and gravel. But none of that bothered him. He loved learning. Books were his escape from the endless struggle of farm life, the droughts, the debts, the long hours of labor under the merciless sun. However, not everyone at Oak Ridge Academy saw Liam's determination as something to admire. Mr. Randall, the school's strictest teacher, saw him as an inconvenience. He had always believed that elite institutions like Oak Ridge were meant for the privileged, not for the son of a mere farmer. One fateful morning, Mr. Randall's disapproval turned into outright hostility. Liam sat at his desk, eagerly scribbling notes as Mr. Randall droned on about economics. The topic was how businesses and wealthy individuals contributed to society's progress. Liam, unable to contain his curiosity, raised his hand. "Sir, what about farmers? Don't they contribute too? Without them, we wouldn't have food," he asked earnestly. A murmur rippled through the classroom. Some students smirked, others exchanged knowing glances. Mr. Randall's eyes narrowed. "Farming is a trade, not a profession, Liam," he replied coldly. "It's not the kind of work that belongs in a discussion about economic progress. Business leaders, investors, and innovators drive the world forward, not farmers with dirt under their fingernails." Liam felt a sting in his chest, but he refused to back down. "But sir, isn't food a necessity? Doesn't that make farming one of the most important jobs?" Mr. Randall's face darkened. He despised being challenged, especially by a boy who, in his mind, had no place in a school like Oak Ridge. His voice turned sharp. "If you're so passionate about farming, maybe that's where you belong." "Not here," he snapped. "Pack your things, Liam. You're expelled." A hush fell over the class. Liam's breath caught in his throat. Expelled? Just for speaking up? He felt his hands tremble as he slowly gathered his books. The walk home was long and silent, each step heavier than the last. When he reached the farm, his father, Mark Carter, saw the heartbreak in his son's eyes before Liam even said a word. Mark listened in silence, his jaw tightening as Liam recounted what had happened. But instead of anger, he placed a hand on Liam's shoulder. "Don't ever be ashamed of where you come from, son," he said firmly. "Being a farmer doesn't make you less than anyone else. It makes you stronger." That night, the news reached someone unexpected, Liam's grandfather, Henry Carter. Though the townsfolk knew Henry as an old farmer, few remembered his past. Decades ago, before retiring to the fields, he had been one of the most successful agricultural innovators in the country. He had revolutionized sustainable farming, helped countless communities, and even advised world leaders on food security. The next morning, Oak Ridge Academy's students gasped as a sleek black helicopter descended onto the school's main field. Teachers and staff rushed outside, shielding their eyes from the wind as the blades slowed to a stop. The door opened, and out stepped Henry Carter, a tall, commanding figure in a crisp suit, his presence exuding quiet power. Principal Harrison hurried forward, his usual calm demeanor replaced with unease. "Mr. Carter. We weren't expecting." "I wasn't expecting my grandson to be expelled for defending the backbone of this nation," Henry interrupted, his voice steady but sharp. "I'd like a word with the teacher who decided that farmers don't belong in his classroom." Mr. Randall's face turned pale. He stumbled over his words as Henry turned to the students gathered around. "How many of you ate breakfast this morning?" Henry asked. Every hand went up. "And how many of you know where that food came from?" Silence. Some students exchanged uncertain glances. Henry nodded knowingly. That's the problem. Too many people take food for granted. They take farmers for granted. But let me tell you something, without farmers, none of you would be sitting in this classroom. No business, no economy, no nation survives without the people who grow its food. He turned to Principal Harrison. Oak Ridge Academy prides itself on excellence. But real excellence isn't just about privilege, it's about knowledge, respect, and contribution. If this school can't teach that, then it's failing its students. The principal swallowed hard. Mr. Carter, we deeply regret. I'm not here for apologies. I'm here for justice. Henry's voice softened as he turned to Liam. A true institution of learning doesn't silence curiosity. It encourages it. If Oak Ridge is truly a place of learning, then Liam belongs here. A long pause. Then, Principal Harrison nodded. Liam's expulsion is revoked. He is welcome to continue his studies. A slow clap began from the back of the crowd. It was one student, then another, until the entire assembly was applauding. Liam's eyes shimmered with emotion as he looked up at his grandfather. That day, everything changed. Mr. Randall resigned a week later, his outdated views no longer tolerated. The school introduced an agricultural economics course, recognizing farming's critical role in society. And Liam? He continued his education, no longer an outsider, but a respected voice in his school. Years later, he would go on to follow in his grandfather's footsteps. Not just as a farmer, but as an advocate for sustainable agriculture, ensuring that no child ever had to defend the value of farming again. As he stood in front of thousands at a global summit years later, Liam's words echoed through the hall. The world needs farmers. The world needs dreamers. And sometimes, the most important lessons come from the soil beneath our feet. The audience rose in a standing ovation, and somewhere in the crowd, Henry Carter smiled, proud not just of the farmer's son, but of the leader he had become.